Tony and I shared a duplex. He and
Yep.
his wife lived upstairs, and we lived downstairs, and so we could lock the outside of it and then just walk up the steps. And so we would take turns, watching, put the kids to bed or whatever, and then go out on a date and have a monitor. And now, obviously, not everybody lives in a duplex, but some kind of swap like that with another couple. That can be a helpful thing. We trusted you guys, and so actually, when we ran to the hospital to have one of our children, we brought you a monitor, or you came and slept on our couch or something. And you're talking about the interaction. Like, yes, there's a time to go watch a movie, and some people really enjoy doing that. But like, don't make that the only date you do, because you can't, for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, you're not really talking. You're not. I mean, maybe you can hold hands or something, but I think there's better things that you can find to do at that time. At least it's the pattern. So how can churches minister to spouses in the midst of their parenting, keeping in mind that they've got both of those responsibilities, those weighty responsibilities on them?
Yeah, so I would say, first, a warning. I think churches need to be careful of making an idol out of marriage, or careful also of the other pitfall that I think many churches can fall into, of forgetting that the principles of Scripture override the benefits of marital experience. Scripture is our greater authority than one person's marital experience and one person's testimonies of how God worked in their lives. So I think those things need to be clearly acknowledged, because I think many churches can fall into the pitfall of especially idolizing marriage. But I think what things that churches can do would be offer things like Art of Marriage, be willing to make the investment to have a seminar like Art of Marriage, led discussion, and have the benefits of that. I mean, I know our church had at one point, and Kentucky, and Danielle and I were so deeply benefited by that. But I think also be willing to, even if it's part of a church budget or just encouraging members that have more to help those who don't have as much, use the church to help support intensive marriage revitalization. Support the couple that needs some biblical counseling in their marriage, or support sending some Christians within the church, maybe newlyweds or those who are just going through a rut, to go to something like Weekend to Remember. Financially help them out. Even watch kids in that. And I think mature Christians especially can benefit younger Christians and less mature Christians by being willing to watch their kids to bless a couple so that they can grow as a couple and disciple their kids better through doing that. Actually, I'm going to speak and really boast on a couple that's really been a blessing to us. There's some neighbors of ours, the Maynards, and they're kind of like honorary additional grandparents through our kids. And they've always been so intentional that they're willing to, they want to give us dates a lot, whenever they can. And they want to help out and be willing to watch the kids so that we can do things together, so that we can do ministry together, but also so that we can have time together as a couple. And I think the example of the Maynards, this retired couple, is a really great example that many older Christians that listen to this might want to follow.
That's really good. Yeah, I like what you had to say there. Churches really can come alongside and not make it an idol, but also realizing that is a key way that people are called to follow Jesus is in their marriage. And so trying to be proactive rather than just reactive. I think some of that can get into the just sermon application or sermon series, but there's the regular application of it. Those classes. I know some churches will do date nights regularly where they will care for the kids and then send the parents out. Just trying to either doing it for free or charging a very, very small amount to just encourage parents to take that time. I think urging people to not to idolize their kids. You talked about not idolizing the marriage. I think there's also that emphasis too, and just being regular in that call. So there's much that can be done. Actually, a couple at our church, they went through some trouble in their marriage few years back, and they were really on the edge of divorce. And through it, Martin became a believer, at least as I understand it, and just a great transformation happened in his life. And his daughter was sort of like, where'd this guy come from? And anyway, God just showed his grace in an amazing way in both their lives. And so then they've told people, yes, we struggled. And then now they will go regularly volunteer at Weekend to Remember, just to pray for other couples and just do what they can. And just supporting people in our church, encouraging them to go, even helping them go. And they did something at their house several weeks back where they invited a number of different couples and had dinner. But then they shared some of their story and talked about, they were just humble and honest, and then talked about what God had done. And so it was just very encouraging to see, and for other couples to hear them talk about how he brought restoration, and to just watch them be honest like that. And so, she talked about wanting to do that more. And so, I mean, if you've got couples who could just talk about God's word, and it doesn't have to be dramatic, but that was just one small thing that could have a big impact. And so it doesn't have to always be a program that the church does. So how can parents and churches partner together to help paint an accurate, healthy view of marriage that's telling the truth about Christ and his church to the coming generations, Tony?
Yeah, great question. I think living in community as Christians is so good. I think this is why it's often so good. I mean, to have small groups, in homes. Small groups where, relationships are built between families together. So that, Christian children see godly couples in addition to hopefully their mom and dads together. And I think that's a simple way. Maybe that's not exactly what you're originally getting to, but I think an example of this actually that benefited me, I remember, was I was not really raised in church a lot, but when I was led to the Lord, I got involved in this church, Rock Church, and there was this couple that was a youth leader couple. They were not like the youth pastor or anything like that. They were just a youth leader couple, and they had 3 teenage kids in the youth group, large family. And I remember oftentimes I would go over to their home. They would have me over for some things, for some youth events, as well as they just have me over sometime just to bless me and get to know me. And they had such a great marriage. And I think it was such a testimony to the importance of marriage to me that I think impacted my life, even if I don't really know that couple anymore. And I think also teach marriage passages in youth group and kids ministry. So often we avoid these kind of things, and we don't apply some of the requirements on biblical marriages on dating when you're a high schooler, of course. You're not called to submit to your boyfriend necessarily, but I think we need to teach biblical passages about marriage, what marriage is, to kids as well as to youth.
That's good. That's cool that couple that you didn't quite remember all about them, but the fact of them doing it still stands out to you all these years later. I think just one very practical thing is, with your calendar. We talked about this in a number of different contexts, but not just packing it so full of things that parents who are married don't have time to try to invest in their relationship. And this is really a few steps removed. Because you can plan some valuable marriage sort of event or teaching time, but when it comes to planning stuff for the kids, it's a very, I don't know, third level application or something. But just being mindful of that, not giving the impression, if you're not at this, and this, and this, and you're not a faithful Christian, and it's really causing them to not be able to invest in some of those other relationships that God has given them primary responsibility for. And also, I didn't talk about this in the notes, when we were going to this stuff before, but a helpful book that, and I'm sure there's other helpful resources out there, but a book by Brian Chappell, Chappell. He used to be the president of Covenant Seminary. Now he's a pastor in the St. Louis area. But he's written a book called Each for the Other, and he spends one portion talking about husbands, one portion talking about wives, and then he has the last third of the book is talking about the role of how the each for the other works out with the children. And so he's addressing parenting, but also keeping an eye on the marriage as well. And I was reading over some of that this morning, and very, very helpful, really good teaching underneath, but it's very plain. It's not a scholar's book or something like that. And so I would commend that to you. So any resources that you might want to point out?
Yeah, in terms of encouraging marriage, I mean, I do want to go back to Art of Marriage. I think it's a great and encouraging resource. So I think one of the best resources on marriage, and that does relate to parenting. He talks, especially in the introduction, about that is What Did You Expect by Paul Tripp. And I know that he even has a video series, I think, that goes along with it that he had been working on for some time.
Yeah, I've seen some of his video stuff with that, and it's very helpful. And yeah, I mean, most whatever I've seen of Paul Tripp's, it is good, gets to the heart, applies the gospel well. And the thing that I liked about the chapel book, it addresses the marriage and then also the parenting with an eye on the marriage at the same time. And so just found that real helpful. Kind of uses Ephesians 5:22 on down to the beginning of chapter 6 as a springboard. And so just real careful teach. Well, Tony, this was a really important conversation, I think, for us to have, just thinking about the health of our own marriage for the sake of our children, for God's glory, and hopefully it's something for our listeners as well, and as they minister to people who are married or will be married, because, to quote John Piper's wife, she can't say enough that marriage is about Christ and the church, and that the Lord holds that pretty high in his priorities, wouldn't you say?
Yes, he does, most certainly.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Theological Family Ministry Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please give us a review on iTunes and share the podcast with your friends on social media. All new episodes are available to listen to on Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spreaker, and iTunes. We hope you have a great week, and join us again every first and third Thursday.